Hey there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. My name is David Tran, and I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm also the co-founder of Xfusion.io, and today I'm joined by Bastian Purrer. He's the co-founder and inventor of humanID, a nonprofit and open-source online identity preserving privacy and combating bots, spam, and abuse online. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
So I've always wanted to have someone from the world of a nonprofit talk on this show, primarily because I think the perspective of a nonprofit is just really different from, I guess, a lot of other startups who are trying to raise venture capital funding to make more money, to raise more venture capital money, to rake in more dollars from users or whatever. What led you to want to become or create a nonprofit?
I did not set out to do that when I initially started humanID. I initially registered the domain humanid.com instead of .org and so on. But as I dove into the world of into the problem more and more, and into what is the best solution to identity online, I just realized that one of the main drivers why it's broken is that the for-profit nature of Facebook, Google, and all the big identity providers online is because they have to optimize it for profit.
Right.
That they have to sell, that they have always an incentive to sell user data, and also that they always have an incentive to sell one person several identities, or give one person several identities, creating the whole, not really have an incentive to stop the whole bot problem. And that if I would set up a nonprofit, on the other hand, people are much more likely to trust me that I will do and will keep doing in the future what I'm promising to do. That is, I don't know, really easy. And I mean, I'm an MBA. I believe in capitalism. I had a for-profit before humanID, but I just realized that for some problems, nonprofits are better equipped, especially when trust plays a major role. Like think about Wikipedia, and that online identity is one of them. You wouldn't want the government passport. Like whoever's responsible for issuing passports be measured by how much profit they make off their passports, right? Like that would lead to problems as well.
I want to break down something you previously shared, how companies like Google and Facebook have a financial incentive to allow people to have multiple identities. If anything, wouldn't it make more sense for them to not allow it, to make sure that the data is actually clean, and when they sell the data, it's, I guess, they can charge a higher rate for it because of its quality? Or do you feel like that's not the case?
You would think so, yeah. But I've worked for 10 years as a digital marketer for e-commerce companies such as Groupon and so on. And most companies that spend money on Facebook and Google are not that sophisticated.
Okay.
They don't actually, they measure their spend by how many eyeballs they get and so on and so forth. And even the financial market, if you follow the reporting on Facebook's quarterly reports, one of the main KPIs being reported is the user growth.
Right.
So Facebook just can't afford to suddenly report 20% less users because they were strict on bots. And just to run some of the math here, right? Facebook says they have 2.8 billion users, but they also publicly admitted that they, in their reports, that they deleted 5 billion accounts last year. So if you think, okay, Facebook internally over the years saw 7.8 billion accounts, then they decided, okay, if we delete 5 billion, we're going to have an 8% user growth or whatever they reported in the end. But it's not a black or white decision, obviously, internally, right? So Facebook can literally internally say, okay, this is how strict we can afford to be, and this is how strict we can't afford to be because we would not show enough users. So, yeah, what you're saying, ultimately, if Facebook would delete 20% of the users, some advertisers would appreciate that a little bit. Ultimately, if I'm a sophisticated advertiser, I'm just good at filtering those out anyway, and I just don't pay for them. But they don't bother me that much. But if I'm an unsophisticated one, I'm going to pay for them. So for Facebook, it's biased towards not doing enough.
Earlier, you mentioned how you believe in capitalism and graduated from an MBA. So what is it out of all the possible, I guess, avenues you can take with your time? Because I think ultimately that is the limited resource that you're putting into for the at least minimum. What makes you feel like the humanID project is so compelling that it just kind of blows out all other ideas out of the water?
Yeah, great question. I think it's just the biggest problem we face as humanity is how we discuss topics and debate and what sets our public discourse and our public opinion ultimately, because it affects every single other issue we're talking about. And I mean, COVID has made this really, really obvious, like that fake news is killing people. Like this has never been as obvious. But even before that, fake news has, fake news and everything adjacent to it has undermined public discourse, undermined elections. It affects things like racism, and so on and so forth. It's always about the bad players used this much better and much more aggressively than the people we want to support and we want to see dominate public discourse or whose opinion we want to hear. So I just think that every other problem will be easier to solve if we manage to discuss and debate things in a democratic and free and open way without those that have technical and financial abilities having a million times more voices than we have.
If I understand the humanID project correctly, it's the fact you're trying to create a secure layer that doesn't track anyone's information, that both represents a person while still giving them anonymity on the web. Is that right?
That's, yes, a very eloquent way to summarize it. 1,000%.
What is your end game to make it like the universal strategy such that every online web provider relies on the humanID and that becomes the central source of like identification from people to, like, I don't know, some persona online?
That could be, definitely it would be very widespread for everything that's sort of a social component where, like, I think e-commerce, like, I mean, if you have a credit card, you're probably human. And it doesn't really matter to the other people on the e-commerce side if you are or you're not. So there's a lot of, like, it doesn't really matter that much. For everything social, every community, it would matter. And that's also an argument for being a nonprofit, by the way, because because standards, like, it's much easier to, like, become a standard and sort of build a natural monopoly that's harder to undermine through pricing. If you are a monopoly, like, nobody would really think about starting a Wikipedia competitor. I mean, maybe it's good because of competition is better, but competition of ideas. But yeah, so we're starting our to gain market access through, like, more sort of extreme use cases. Examples are social media sites where obviously they naturally struggle with spam, specifically social media sites for, like, a mental health community or things like this. And then use cases where the anonymity and the privacy is just really, like, life-threatening. Like, people, if there's a leak, and a leak can happen to anyone, like CIA had a leak, Facebook had a leak, and so on, it would literally endanger the people's lives. Examples here are we're working with one of the biggest whistleblowing apps in America, so people that report arm or truck crimes to the Department of Justice can currently already use humanID. We are talking, for example, to people that help asylum seekers from other countries. Oftentimes, with, like, one of the people we're talking to has, like, people that have an LGBT background from places like Afghanistan. Like, you wouldn't put your data anywhere on any website if you're not 1,000% sure that nothing happens to it. And so, yeah, but to your question, we generally want to be a general standard for communities and the social web.
How do you ensure that one person couldn't have more than one humanID?
So right at the current, this goes a little bit in the technical implementation. Right now, it's mostly about driving up the cost of having several. We're not making it impossible yet. We definitely have ideas how to make that better. Right now, to create a new email address costs you, like, nothing, right? And to automate that is relatively easy too if you have some resources for that. We are basically requiring everyone to have a unique and exclusive phone number. We verify that and then immediately delete the phone number, creating only a unique hash that can only be recreated with a combination of that phone number and the client, so the partner website you're on.
I see.
Or you're logging into. So the created hash is unique to both the phone number and that platform. So that even if two of our clients would leak their data, the same person's data could not be matched together. Sort of like creating data silos. But ultimately, like, you probably pay, like, I don't know, $30 to $50 or something per month for your phone number. That is a lot more cost than maintaining an email address and creating a new email address. And that is the main factor. We're doing a few other things too, and we have some ideas for the future, like, for example, letting people anonymously verify other identifiers they have in their life, like, I don't know, an EDU address or something like this, something that's limited. Or using like social networks to see, it's much harder for AI to fake a natural social network because that's not public information usually. So that would be like, there's a lot of ideas, but right now we're already driving up the cost of running a bot network by at least 30 times. And that will naturally result in much, much less spam.
So the idea is that someone can only have a human ID for each phone number that they have, technically.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
If someone had...
And so... Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, so we basically see like two adversaries. One is like the just random jackass on the internet that like harasses someone. And they're probably not going to figure out, maybe they know how to set up a Google Voice number if they're very sophisticated, but they're not going to find a third or fourth number.
Okay.
And then the other adversary is like I've seen this from the inside before. That's where I started humanID in the beginning. This sort of like government-sponsored or party-sponsored a huge bot network campaign, the kind of that Russia is using all around the world, that other players are using as well. We probably can't stop them from creating like 100 or 200 accounts, but we'll drive up their costs massively, and they can create 10 million accounts like they do right now.
So I guess one of the questions I've always had for nonprofits is how do they sustain themselves if there isn't a product they charge for, or do you have a project that you charge for?
We do charge for our product. We charge platforms that implement it per login. So you might have worked with Twilio or Nexmo, where it's similar. You charge for every SMS sent. We're actually cheaper than them right now. Or like depending on which exact product you use on the end. But like we're very price competitive. Just that we don't send you the actual phone number used. And having said that, with our current user base, like a few thousand users a month, that doesn't really move the needle yet. So right now we are based on donations. We have grants from both Harvard and Mozilla, and a lot of volunteer help from amazing people from MIT, Stanford, the best. Actually, your alma mater, Berkeley, is our number one university in terms of volunteers in the team. So like some of the best universities in the country, we have built this like program that people really like, where they like, work like startup employees, but really make an impact.
How did you start that?
How did we start that? There's a platform called Handshake where people advertise student internships. We started that, and then we just like lead by examples by being volunteers ourselves. Me and my co-founder started running this when I moved back to the States for my MBA, and just led by example, working volunteers as well, and just making sure you have people actually learn and are not just there for the impact, but also learn, and then they recommend it, and this takes off from there. I personally, I have built a company before that in the e-commerce space, and before that I've had marketing teams. Leading a volunteer nonprofit team teaches you so much about communicating a vision, about really making sure people are actually happy and not just like the paycheck or have to get the paycheck. That I think later in my career, when I will certainly go back into for-profit, I will take along a lot of these learnings.
So when you start this organization, was it started off by like effectively like student volunteer groups that just wanted to find something to spend their time in and like gain skills along the way? Is that how it started?
So we're not all students. Now the first 1.5 years, me and my friends who are all engineers basically built the login first. That was the first 1.5 years. Or like, let's say the first 6 months, I just did research, how to do this, biometrics, blockchain, and like looked at everything, and ended up being a pretty simple solution is actually the best way to go. And then we spent like a year. That was like sort of the year where I also did most of my MBA, so I was a bit busier. We built the product, or the basic product, and then we started the volunteer program. when we actually had to start doing marketing, sales, fundraising, things like that.
How long did you spend working on the initial version of the product before you felt like it was ready to put out and start acquiring users?
Like a year.
A year? Okay.
But it could have been built faster.
Okay.
But we just really want to make sure it's secure and safe, and it could have definitely been built faster.
So what has been your strategy thus far, and what's been, I guess, the most successful, either in terms of like channels or messaging or like value props to get people to adopt your platform?
So I've touched on this a little bit before. Like, we're basically looking for these like very extreme use cases where people will just be like, where people already use privacy first logins and don't really use Facebook or something like this, such as whistleblowing apps, or and then like talking to startups really, really early, even before they launch, when they kind of like look for their angle and like, okay, how are we going to differentiate? And privacy is a really good branding differentiator these days. It gets you press immediately, and that just really drives home the message. And some of you will be surprised, is like 95% of consumer-facing startups don't monetize through data. And even if they do, they don't do it through the personal identifiable like data, like the email address and names. They like sell like other, like, I don't know, like characteristics of user behavior or preferences on the platform expressed. And you might actually get users to express those more and give you more data if you don't have their personal identifiers, because there's much more danger for the user.
Right.
So there's actually like people have been pretty receptive to our messaging, and our sales cycle is pretty long, like, because people need to like find ways in their roadmap and so on. But we're really getting integrations now, and we'll have a bunch of integrations in Q1 next year. And I think from then, when people see, okay, this works with these extreme use cases, then we will see more and more people coming in, inbound, coming in this way. We're doing really well on SEO, actually. It's kind of good for a nonprofit, because once you did it, it's free. So if you know how to do SEO, then and have good writers like we do, then that is like three quarters of our traffic now.
So when you're going about and trying to, I guess, put this in front of people, what are some of the questions they'll usually ask along the way?
Pricing,
Okay.
that's for sure. People are worried about that, but they don't have to. I mean, Facebook is free, right? So like this, but like a few cents, or like 2-3 cents per user is usually affordable.
And is that like a one-time cost?
US user. So per login. So every time the user gets an SMS for verifying, we have to pay for that SMS. So we charge a little bit more than that SMS to the client. There's no risk. It's a no-risk price.
I see.
There's no integration costs and so on. But like, I mean, like how the integration works is for sure a question we're getting quite a bit. That's. I mean, sometimes a little bit like how it exactly works, like the technology behind it. Depends on how technical the person is we're talking to. And then like, I mean, how just like the existing data we have, and that was definitely also one of the blockers. Like, nobody wants to be the first one to try something, but now that we increasingly have use cases, that should be removed.
What's the time to implement for someone who's running it like a small social media site of some kind and wants to implement the humanID?
Yeah, we have seen partners do it in a week before. It's very comparable to implementing the Facebook SDK.
I see.
From a technological point of view, so it's really not that big of a deal. Obviously, we have a web version, iOS, Android native, React native, Flutter, everything available. So it should be pretty straightforward. It depends a little bit on the setup, of course, as well on the partner side.
Are you trying to? Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Are you trying to, like, would it be a dream for you to get like Twitter and like Medium and like Reddit as users of the humanID project? Is that like the dream?
I think it would really fit with Reddit. With the like anonymity, Reddit understood that anonymity is not the problem, but lack of accountability is, and a lot of their product shows that they understand that. we also believe that we need disruption, and that we believe there will be a new generation of social media startups coming up in the next few years that will disrupt what is clearly broken. And I think we believe more in being part of the next Twitter.
Gotcha.
I don't know. I mean, Twitter just had a change in CEO. Maybe they'll be open for it. And we're open source. If they just want to take the idea and implement themselves, they can do that too. We would be really proud and happy as well. Then maybe to go to the whole nonprofit aspect versus your other founders. The great thing about being a nonprofit is you don't have to hate your competition. You know how when you're in I've been there so many times. You're in this competitive thing, and you use the competition as the evil guys to motivate your team. In nonprofit, it's really the opposite. Everyone is just open and proud and transparent about everything. And even if somebody else just builds a anonymous login inspired by our idea, and it's not called humanID, we would all still be incredibly happy and proud.
What do you foresee as the next generation of social media that will disrupt the current generation?
I think it would be anonymous, at least partially anonymous. I think anonymity is think about elections. Elections work because they're anonymous and because it's one per person. And I believe the same thing is true for our social discourse, and it's not true right now. It would be true for a functioning social discourse. So I think anonymous platforms have been tried in the past. They failed because they became full of spam and harassment. But if you build by the algorithms and you have a good way to keep people accountable, have one account per person, then I think you could make that work. I think with authoritarian regimes being more and more strict, or in pursuing people or persecuting people who voice any criticism online, as little as a Facebook like has gotten people in prison. People will more and more embrace truly anonymous platforms.
Earlier, you're mentioning how at some point you want to go back to the for-profit world. How will you know when you're quote unquote done with humanID? How do you know when you feel like you can call yourself successful for what you've built and ready to move on to the next big thing?
I mean, I know what my skill set is, and I'm a builder. I think once humanID is in a stable state, product-wise and funding-wise, that would probably be the case. But we're probably still 1 or 2 years away from that. And I mean, I don't know. I will just do whatever drives the most impact. And if that's a for-profit, non-profit, it's kind of sideshow, not that important.
Would you consider building the next generation of the social media that uses the humanID as the foundation of its login?
Absolutely. But if that's the case, then I would probably disengage from humanID for incentive problems. Because trust is everything.
Right. So what do you feel other people can be doing in the world of entrepreneurship to be building trust amongst users as well as potential future users?
I think people, the end users, understand more and more that they can. And it's okay, this will sound extremely anti-capitalistic, but hear me out. I think people understand more and more that for-profits just can't make any promises, and that any promises they make are ultimately PR. Because, as a CEO, and again, I've gone to HBS, I had these discussions. As a CEO, you're legally responsible to make profits. And there was literally cases, Craigslist CEO got sued by the minority shareholder, eBay, at the time, for not completely for doing things that were not profit maximizing. So even a minority shareholder can get the CEO out for doing anything actually good. That good as in needs sacrifices profits. So the truth is, a CEO has to legally maximize profit, and everything else is just PR. PR to maximize profits. And I'm not even saying that in a blaming way. I think CEOs getting too much blame because they don't really, they're just puppets from the shareholders ultimately. And the legal situation has to change. So I think one way to drive impact is working on in politics or doing something there. Now that's harder for me because I'm a foreigner, but like I encourage people to do that and to push for change there. Something that has changed is the public benefits corporations. There's a new concept that's now a legal incorporation standard in 35 states, which basically enables you as a for-profit leader to actually make promises that are legally enforceable, because only then does it actually matter. So you basically, in your bylaws, you can sort of state certain values that you can also maximize for, and then you cannot be sued if you actually do that. And I think this can actually make companies stronger. And when you think about countries, like, it's really good that countries have constitutions. America would probably not be where it is if it didn't have a pretty stable and pretty enforced constitution that cannot just be changed and thrown out of the window by one CEO slash president. And the same is true for Germany, and other countries. Constitutions have a really important factor by really enshrining values in a way that it can only be changed by massive consensus. And sort of that's what a PBC, what a public benefits corporation, does.
Is a PBC different from a B Corp?
Yeah, there's a little bit of confusion here. There is the B Corp sort of certificate, which is given by a, I think, nonprofit that is trying to drive similar social change, and that is related to certain reporting requirements. So these two things are different. I personally think both are going in the right direction, pushing people in the right direction, but I think the legal incorporation part is ultimately more sustainable. Because if you're a B Corp, you can still just throw it out of the window if you need to, and if don't do evil doesn't matter anymore one day from the other, then it's out of the window. No pun intended at all.
Wait, can't a corporation also just change their bylaws if they change their CEOs?
No, they can only do that with depending on their bylaws, they can only do that with a massive.
I see. I see what you're saying. Okay.
So a minority shareholder or a board member, or however the company is structured, could block these changes. So it's not 100%. Yeah, sure. Just like the US could change the constitution with 2/3 of states and 2/3 of Congress. So never.
So the last set of questions I wanted to ask you is, what do you think the government could or should be doing as it relates to privacy?
I think the most important part is protecting encryption. That for and foremost, that just changes the game on an international level, how the US acts there. Also protecting other things like that hardware devices are sacrosanct and cannot be touched, like what Apple is sort of scratching on right now, where they said they would scan iPhones for certain pictures. That's just if we take that protection down, then all software can do nothing anymore. But beyond that, to improve the current situation, I think just there's privacy protection, making sure that people store their data correctly, what the CCPA in California does. I think that sets certain good limits, but it doesn't really solve what's wrong on the internet. I think there's other things more giving people more visibility of how their data is sold and matched, and what data Facebook has on them, making it as easy to unsubscribe from emails as they make it to subscribe for emails, and not having to call to unsubscribe, like some companies that you still ask for.
I wasn't aware that's legal.
But all of these... Sorry?
I wasn't aware that's legal to have I thought every email to comply with the Can-Spam Act has to have a very easy way to opt out.
Yeah, it might be in the Can-Spam Act.
Okay.
But that's only... I think that's only a Californian thing.
Oh.
If I'm not wrong. And plus, not all of these laws are fully enforced.
Right.
But these are small steps in the right direction. I think the bigger aspects are really splitting up these massive companies. Because let's say you have all these protection in place. I think Google or Facebook in their environments could still do massive harm. An example is Google is enforcing all these supposedly privacy protecting things in their browser, but actually what they're doing is they're making their own browser more powerful and their own first-party cookie more powerful. And Facebook can do the same with like if everything is separated and there's no cookie and data matching anymore, then they will have by far the best personal information compared to anyone else. So I think all these privacy legislation doesn't really solve the core aspects on the internet, and those could only be solved on the privacy side. Probably be like breaking up some of these companies, and or enforcing things like strict separation within the company, like Chinese walled gardens within companies. How do you say that? I think much more legislation and there's much other discussion on like how could the social internet be solved. I think there's things like much more transparency, especially around algorithms. I'm not a fan of where the social internet is going in terms of like allowing censorship and things like that, like because it's very intransparent.
Right.
And that's just really dangerous. Like imagine a presidential candidate, and actually Elizabeth Warren last time ran on the promise of breaking up Facebook. Does anyone really trust Facebook that they wouldn't internally somehow manipulate their algorithm to not have that candidate win? Nobody would. And I literally know from friends for examples like that. Like when Google Plus came up and the Facebook Messenger, suddenly the links to Google Plus weren't clickable. Things like that. Those are intentional moves. And that's just so dangerous. Like these companies becoming way too powerful. I think social feeds should, from a certain size, should be completely open source, including a lot of moderation decisions. I don't think any laws to regulate an algorithm will be they will only make things worse because it's just too difficult for the political discourse. Anyway,
do you think we'll see the rise of a non-profit social media?
So try my co-founders who are all big into crypto, and they'll probably be like a decentralized social media. I don't think so. If I would start a social media, it would not be non-profit. It would probably be a public benefits corporation. Okay. The reason is you just need too much capital to build that much technology.
Well, Bastian, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm extremely thankful for your time and insights on the world of privacy. I'm really glad people are working on projects like the humanID. For anyone in the audience who wants to follow you along in your journey or maybe even contribute to the project, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, the website is human-id.org. We are a 501c3, so all your donations or anything would be tax deductible and will be 100% used to build technology and support an amazing team of unpaid volunteers who work their ass off for this cause. And otherwise ping me on Twitter, Bastian Purrer.
Sounds good. And we'll make sure to have those links on the landing page. Well, thanks again for your time, Bastian.